There is a mystery hidden in the Bible that most people never notice. Why does the shepherd appear again and again throughout the story of Scripture? Was it simply an ancient profession, or was God revealing something much deeper? A shepherd had to know the way before the sheep ever took the first step. He had to know where the water was, where the danger was, and which sheep was too weak to survive alone. And when danger came in the darkness, the shepherd stood between the predator and the flock. The shepherd did not measure the value of the sheep by its strength. The weakest sheep still mattered. And perhaps that is where the mystery begins. Abel was not a king, a soldier, or a powerful ruler. He was a shepherd. His world was simple: the land, the flock, the wilderness, and the responsibility of caring for living creatures. But the Bible gives us a clue that his story was about more than shepherding. Abel brought an offering to God from his flock. From the very beginning, the image of the sheep was connected to worship, sacrifice, and a relationship with God. Generations passed, and the shepherd became an even greater part of the biblical story.
The flock grows strong, blessed be God. Indeed, Abraham, they thrive under your hand. Watch over them, my brother.
Every flock needed pasture, every animal needed water, and every shepherd carried a responsibility. In a land where water and pasture could mean the difference between life and death, knowing where to lead the flock was everything. But as the flocks grew, something else began to happen.
The land cannot hold both our flocks any longer.
We need more room. The pasture is drying.
We must separate to survive.
Enough. I will hear your grievances. Lower your arms and listen. We won't listen to him.
So Abraham allowed Lot to choose the land he wanted, rather than turning the conflict into war. And once again, the shepherd's world became a lesson about something greater than sheep.
Keep them moving forward. Watch for the stragglers. The path ahead is clear. God will protect us.
And the story would continue through his son, Isaac. And once again, the shepherd's life became part of a much larger story.
Then came Jacob.
And with Jacob, the life of the shepherd would become a story of endurance.
Come on now, little one. The others need you. We're almost there. Bah! Just a little further.
He knew the heat of the day and the cold of the night. He also knew the fear of discovering that one sheep was missing. And when one disappeared, he could not simply walk away.
There, little one. Let's get you out. Careful. No scratches, you're safe now. Good boy.
Perhaps Jacob was learning the same lesson every true shepherd eventually learns.
The shepherd was not chosen because the work was easy. He was shaped by the responsibility of caring for what was entrusted to him.
Perhaps Jacob was learning the same lesson every true shepherd eventually learns.
The path is long, but we must continue. Into the wilderness. His name was Moses.
And one day, while tending his flock in the wilderness, Moses saw something he could not explain.
A bush was burning, but it was not being consumed. And there, the shepherd who had spent years leading sheep was about to hear the voice of God.
Here I am.
Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. The staff in his hand had been a shepherd's tool. Soon, it would become a symbol of God's power. And the shepherd began his journey back toward Egypt. He would leave the wilderness behind and walk into the greatest mission of his life. The shepherd who once guided sheep would now guide thousands of people through the wilderness.
Keep moving. The valley ahead holds promise.
We follow you, leader.
The same qualities required of a shepherd were now required of a leader.
The time has come. Move forward. Keep moving.
His name was David.
David's world was quiet. His audience was mostly sheep, the hills, and the God he worshipped.
But the peaceful life of a shepherd could change in a moment.
David had already learned what it meant to defend his flock. A shepherd could not simply watch danger approach. When the flock was threatened, the shepherd stood between danger and the sheep.
He did not fight for glory. He fought because the sheep belonged to his care.
And every journey ended with the same question. Did every sheep make it home?
While others slept, David watched.
And in the silence of the hills, the shepherd learned to worship.
The hills were becoming his classroom. The flock was becoming his responsibility. And God was becoming the center of his life.
Then one day, David was called away from the flock.
He did not know why. He did not know what was waiting for him.
He was the youngest son, the shepherd no one expected to become a king. The visitor had come looking for a leader. Everyone expected the strongest son to be chosen.
David! David, come quickly! But the chosen one was still out in the fields.
Then the young shepherd walked in.
And in that moment, the shepherd was seen in a completely different way.
The shepherd boy was chosen to become king.
Yet being chosen did not immediately remove him from the flock.
Before David wore a crown, he still had sheep to care for. The future king was still learning the lessons of the shepherd. He was learning to search for the one that was missing. He was learning that one sheep could be worth the journey. And the shepherd kept bringing the lost back home. But David's story was about to leave the hills. Soon, the shepherd would leave the peaceful hills and enter a place of great challenge.
He arrived as a shepherd among soldiers.
And there, the shepherd would face something far greater than any predator he had ever seen.
The same courage that once protected sheep was now about to protect a nation.
The shepherd was walking toward his greatest test. But the secret of the shepherd had never been about the staff, the flock, or even the wilderness. It was about what the shepherd became while caring for what had been entrusted to him. And generations later, another shepherd would be called from the fields, this time to speak to a nation.
His name was Amos, and his story would reveal that sometimes God calls the shepherd not to lead sheep, but to warn people.
Amos was a shepherd, but God would call him away from the flock to speak a warning to an entire nation. He knew the sound of sheep. He knew the silence of the wilderness. But now he would learn the burden of a prophet. The shepherd was being sent beyond his familiar fields.
Leaving the flock behind did not mean abandoning his calling. It meant carrying its lessons into another kind of wilderness.
The shepherd entered a world very different from the quiet hills.
Here, the sheep were gone, but the responsibility to speak remained.
The shepherd had become a voice.
And his message carried the weight of someone who understood what happens when the vulnerable are forgotten. And his message carried the weight of someone who understood what happens when the vulnerable are forgotten.
And the shepherd's journey continued. For generations, shepherds had watched the night.
They watched the stars. They watched the weather. They watched the flock.
And one night, on those same hills, shepherds would witness something the world had been waiting for.
They were ordinary men, doing an ordinary job, on an ordinary night.
But this night was not going to remain ordinary. Something appeared above them. And suddenly, the darkness was filled with a light they had never seen before. The shepherds were terrified. But the message was not one of judgment. They were told not to be afraid, because a message of great joy had come to them.
And the first people to hear it were not kings.
They were not rulers, priests, or generals.
They were shepherds.
And the shepherds understood that they had to go.
They left the hills and hurried toward Bethlehem. They searched through the sleeping town for the sign they had been given. And then they found him. The Messiah had been born, and the shepherds were among the first to see him. They had spent their lives protecting sheep. Now they stood before the one who would be called the shepherd. The sign was simple: a child, a manger, a humble place.
And the shepherds understood something they could not yet fully explain.
They had heard heaven speak, and they had seen the promise with their own eyes. We have witnessed a miracle.
They returned to the fields, but they were no longer the same men.
They had discovered that the shepherd's story was pointing beyond the flock. For thousands of years, shepherds had guarded sheep. But now the Bible was revealing a greater shepherd. The question was no longer simply why God used shepherds. The deeper question was this: why does the Bible keep using the shepherd as its picture of leadership, sacrifice, protection, and love? Each shepherd carried part of the mystery.
But none of them was the final answer.
The shepherd was leading us towards someone greater. And then Jesus used the language of the shepherd to describe himself. He did not simply speak about shepherds. He revealed himself through the image. The one the shepherds had been pointing toward had finally arrived.
He would speak of the lost, the vulnerable, the wandering, and the ones who needed to be brought home.
No, little one, stop! Don't go up there, it's dangerous. Please, come back.
It was about the heart of the one who refuses to abandon what is lost. It was about the heart of the one who refuses to abandon what is lost. But the greatest mystery was still waiting to be revealed. What does it truly mean for Jesus to be called the Good Shepherd?
To understand why Jesus called himself the Good Shepherd, we must first understand what a shepherd was expected to be.
But the greatest mystery was still waiting to be revealed. What does it truly mean for Jesus to be called the Good Shepherd?
He knew when one was weak. He knew when one was injured. He knew when one was missing.
He searched for green pasture and quiet water, because the flock depended completely on his guidance.
This is why the language of the shepherd was so powerful.
When Jesus spoke of the shepherd, his listeners immediately understood the picture. The shepherd was also the guardian of the flock.
At night, the shepherd stayed awake while the sheep slept.
When a predator approached, the shepherd could not hide behind the flock.
The guardian stood between danger and the sheep.
Jesus took this familiar image and revealed something extraordinary.
The shepherd did not merely lead the sheep. He became the way into safety.
The sheep followed because they trusted the shepherd's voice.
And Jesus spoke of a relationship deeper than simple obedience.
The sheep recognized the shepherd's voice.
And Jesus used that image to describe those who hear his voice and follow him.
But sheep can wander.
They can become distracted. They can lose the path. They can wander farther than they realize.
And when one sheep was missing, the shepherd noticed.
He did not say, "I still have enough sheep." He went looking for the one that was lost.
Because the lost sheep still mattered.
The search ended when the lost one was found.
And the shepherd carried it home.
But Jesus was revealing something even greater than the story of the lost sheep. The Good Shepherd was walking toward a place where the shepherd would offer himself for others.
The path of the shepherd was leading toward the cross.
The disciples did not yet understand what was coming.
The shepherd would soon walk alone. He knew the suffering ahead, and still he chose to continue.
The shepherd was about to be taken.
Yet the Good Shepherd did not run. He was being led toward suffering so that others could be spared. He was being led toward suffering so that others could be spared. He carried the weight of the cross.
The Good Shepherd was laying down his life for the sheep.
This was not the death of a shepherd who failed to protect his flock.
It was the deliberate sacrifice of the shepherd who chose to save his flock.
But the story did not end at the grave. The stone would not remain where it was. The shepherd who laid down his life had risen.
Death had not defeated the Good Shepherd.
The shepherd was alive. And now the disciples had a mission. Let us begin.
The flock would grow far beyond the hills of Israel. The message of the shepherd would travel from village to village, nation to nation.
And the shepherd's image would remain at the heart of the faith.
From the first shepherd in the ancient records to the Good Shepherd in the later accounts, the pattern had been there all along.
The shepherd leads.
The shepherd protects.
The shepherd cares. And the good shepherd does something even greater. He seeks the lost. He sees the forgotten.
And he calls people from every nation into one flock.
But there is still one final mystery. If the Bible's shepherds were preparing us to understand Jesus, what does the shepherd ask from his sheep?
After following the shepherd through thousands of years of scripture, we finally arrive at the question, what does the shepherd ask from his sheep?
He does not ask the sheep to become shepherds.
He asks them to follow the shepherd. Because sheep can easily wander when they stop listening.
Following the shepherd means trusting his direction, even when the road is unfamiliar.
Sometimes the shepherd leads through places we would never choose for ourselves.
But the shepherd sees what the sheep cannot see.
The storm does not mean the shepherd has abandoned the flock.
Sometimes his presence is revealed not by removing the storm, but by carrying us through it.
The shepherd carries the weak.
Let me help you up. Thank you, I needed that. Take it slowly.
There we go, little one. It's just a scratch. Now you'll be safe.
The Good Shepherd does not turn away from the wounded heart.
The shepherd watches when everyone else is asleep.
The Good Shepherd watches over his people. The sheep sleep because someone is watching. There is peace when you know you are not alone.
The flock was never meant to remain small. The shepherd calls people from every nation.
Different languages, different backgrounds, different stories. One shepherd. The shepherd does not erase their differences. He brings them together.
The flock includes the strong and the weak, the confident and the broken.
The shepherd sees the one everyone else overlooks.
He searches for the lost. He searches for the lost.
He brings the lost back home.
And the shepherd does not simply rescue the sheep. He gives them a direction.
The water is cool and refreshing.
Thank you for leading us here.
Rest well, friends.
He provides what the flock cannot provide for itself.
He leads toward life.
Even when the valley is dark, the shepherd knows where the light is.
The sheep do not need to understand every turn. They need to trust the one who knows the way.
Faith begins where certainty ends.
Now we can see the pattern. The shepherd represents sacrifice, leadership, protection, patience, responsibility, and mercy. The sheep were never the center of the story. The shepherd represents sacrifice, leadership, protection, patience, responsibility, and mercy. And perhaps that is the mystery hidden in all these stories. They were not random characters. They were pieces of a much larger picture. The picture of a God who seeks, protects, carries, sacrifices, and brings the lost home.
So if you ever feel lost, remember the shepherd who searches.
If you are weak, remember the shepherd who carries.
If you are afraid, remember the shepherd who protects. And if you do not know where to go, remember the shepherd who knows the way.
From Abraham, from Jacob to Moses, from David to Amos, from the shepherds of Bethlehem.
The greatest mystery was never why the Bible speaks so much about shepherds. It is that through every shepherd, Scripture was teaching us, and perhaps the most important question is not whether you know the shepherd, but whether you are willing to follow his voice.
After following the shepherd through thousands of years of Scripture, we finally arrive at the question, what does the shepherd ask from his sheep? After following the shepherd through thousands of years of Scripture, we finally arrive at the question, what does the shepherd ask from his sheep?
He asks them to follow the shepherd.
Because sheep can easily wander when they stop listening.
Following the shepherd means trusting his direction, even when the road is unfamiliar. Following the shepherd means trusting his direction, even when the road is unfamiliar.
But the shepherd sees what the sheep cannot see.
The storm does not mean the shepherd has abandoned the flock.
Sometimes his presence is revealed not by removing the storm, but by carrying us through it.
The shepherd carries the weak, and the guide still cares for those who cannot continue by their own strength. The shepherd does not discard the vulnerable.
The Good Shepherd does not turn away from the wounded heart. The Good Shepherd does not turn away from the wounded heart.
The Good Shepherd watches over his people.
The sheep sleep because someone is watching. There is peace when you know you are not alone. The flock was never meant to remain small.
The shepherd calls people from every nation.
Different languages, different backgrounds, different stories. One shepherd. Different languages, different backgrounds, different stories. One shepherd.
The flock includes the strong and the weak, the confident and the broken.
The shepherd sees the one everyone else overlooks. Child, you are not alone.
Thank you, my lord.
He searches for the lost. He restores the broken. He brings the lost back home.
And the shepherd does not simply rescue the sheep. He gives them a direction.
He leads them to living water.
He provides what the flock cannot provide for itself.
He leads toward life.
Even when the valley is dark, the shepherd knows where the light is. The sheep do not need to understand every turn. They need to trust the one who knows the way.
Faith begins where certainty ends.
Now we can see the pattern.
The shepherd represents sacrifice, leadership, protection, patience, responsibility, and mercy.
Generation after generation, the shepherd carried the same lesson.
The sheep were never the center of the story.
The shepherd was.
And perhaps that is the mystery hidden in all these stories.
They were not random characters. They were pieces of a much larger picture. The picture of a God who seeks, protects, carries, sacrifices, and brings the lost home.
So if you ever feel lost,
Remember the shepherd who searches.
The picture of a God who seeks, protects, carries, sacrifices, and brings the lost home.
If you are afraid, remember the shepherd who protects. And if you do not know where to go, remember the shepherd who knows the way. From Abel to Abraham, from Jacob to Moses, from David to Amos, from the shepherds of Bethlehem to night.
The greatest mystery was never why the Bible speaks so much about shepherds. It is that through every shepherd, Scripture.
And perhaps the most important question is not whether you know the shepherd, but whether you are willing to follow his voice.